Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dante Ang II, Chairman and CEO of the Manila Times. Welcome to today's Roundtable interview. We're pleased to have today the spokesperson of the Commission of Human Rights, Atty Jacqueline Guia. Good afternoon, Attorney.
So the Commission on Human Rights strove to maintain its relevance, especially during this time of the pandemic. It was incumbent upon us to make sure that our services were felt online and offline, even in far-flung areas. And I think one of the things that we had to address during this year was the COVID pandemic itself. We are so happy and we welcome government's initiative when it comes to vaccination. We supported government's campaign with a similar one from our end. We launched the Vaccination for All campaign as early as last year. And our mantra was to leave no one behind. And we are happy that we now see the fruits of that initiative from the government. And basically, we also see an improvement of how the pandemic was managed. During the early months, there was a peace and order approach to the pandemic, but we kept on stressing that it's a right to health issue. And they have to make sure that there is the employment of our humanitarian approach. And we saw that in the remaining months of 2021. And so we're heartened also. And then part of it was also our internal thrust to make sure that we remain accessible. So we expanded our legal services to electronic means. We launched the Tanggol Karapatan e-lawyering services. We extended the services of our lawyers online. We made available hotlines for them to call. And then we also activated our 24/7 hotlines, not only the central office, but also at the regional offices. And that was key in making sure that all requests, all complaints were received by the Commission and acted upon. And then it was also during this time of the pandemic that we launched the Gender Ombud Portal.
Okay.
So that during the time of the pandemic, cases of domestic abuses are prone to happen, and that's the reason why
I heard about that because they're stuck at home. Tama po ba yan? They're stuck at the home, and then instead of having a normal routine where you go out and maybe get a break, they're all in a pressure cooker. Totoo po ba yan?
That's right. So we anticipated that, and that's the reason why we set up the portal. And then it was also during this time that many OFWs were keeping in touch with us because they also had issues when it came to the pandemic. So we also launched an OFW portal. We made sure that we were able to refer them to government agencies which has primary mandate, and they are not left to fend for themselves. And then, of course, we also saw many other issues. We had to respond to many instances of red tagging. So that was one. And then we also continued our investigation work. There were also many killings that we had to respond to in other sectors, not only in relation to the campaign on drugs, but also there were some media killings. There were also some local executive killings. We've noted there are some also election-related violence killings that we had to respond to, and that pertains to our protection work. The first one pertained to our legal assistance work, still under the protection work. And then one of the other programs of the Commission is prevention work. This pertains now to our jail visitorial mandate. In the years past, we often went to visit detention facilities to check the conditions of the jails and see that it conforms to the Mandela rules. But during the Fifth Commission, we sought to operationalize the interim national preventive mechanism. And this mechanism is very different in its approach because it's non-adversarial. Kasi diba, sometimes detention facilities are so worried when they see the CHR, they think we're looking for cases. But this mechanism seeks to prevent torture by being more engaging with custodial facilities and by seeking to improve the conditions by collaborating with government. And in so doing, it employs a non-adversarial approach. It tries to see that prevention of torture in the long term happens. And then it's a multi-sectoral approach. So there are medical experts, there are civil society, there are also previous jail detention officers in that regard. And then our jail visitorial program expanded this year with the enactment of the mental health law. We also included mental health institutions in the facilities that we're going to monitor. We're working closely with the DOH and other government agencies. And, mental health has become a very relevant issue, especially during this time of pandemic. So we are keen on finalizing the details on how we can effectively manage mental health together with other government agencies. And then the third program that we have is pertaining to policy work. So during this year, we released a number of advisories and position papers. Our advisories are addressed to the government as a whole. We want to keep them updated about what are the human rights framework when it comes to several thematic issues. And we also submitted a lot of position papers to Congress on various legislation. And basically, the thrust was to make sure that they employ a human rights-based approach when it comes to legislating laws. And then we also have promotions program. And we try to make sure that we were able to inculcate a deeper understanding about human rights. In this regard, we were able to produce a lot of modules. We hosted a lot of webinars. It's also interesting to note that we recently launched the Human Rights Institute. And then we also had a lot of online modules and academy, and then we also issued a lot of press statements. We also continued and sustained our campaign, the OK Card campaign. One of the criticisms against the CHR was that it was too overly critical of the administration, or of the government in general. And we wanted to dispel that notion. So through this OK Card campaign, we identify policies, programs, laws, projects of the government that are actually human rights based. And we put a stamp of approval, reinforcing the thought that basically these programs are actually good. It's in fulfillment of the state policy to guarantee full respect for human rights. And what we do at the bottom is to include the legal provision or the human rights standard to which it caters to. So basically, it reinforces the idea that if government does its job well, then they're actually doing human rights work and promotion. Yeah, tapos we also strove to make sure that our presence in social media platforms are felt. Our Facebook account continues to thrive. And then we've recently ventured, aside from Instagram and Twitter, we've also ventured into TikTok. And then basically, we're trying to...
You adapted na rin,
Yeah. Buti na lang we have young people in our team. So
yeah,
they're very
we were just discussing how old I am compared to my reporters these days.
You look young, sir, so don't worry.
No, I'm not young po.
Age is just a number. And I see that you have got a happy disposition, so I'm sure that bodes well. But so we ventured into those platforms because we wanted to make sure that we are able to engage with the public. We're also able to simplify the understanding about human rights because it's so misunderstood. And then our mandate is also not known to many. So that's what we tried to do in the past year. And it's been a busy year. Chair also died. That
Yes,
was
sorry about that.
unfortunate. It remains to be functional, and right now, they've reached a consensus. So we have the OIC right now. It's Commissioner Gwendolyn Pimentel Gana, and they are on a rotation basis.
I
So
see.
each of them serves a 30-day or 40-day period, and then the next one in rotation will be Commissioner Leia Tanodra Armamento. And then 2022,
Yes. Yeah, because there's only a few months left with the Duterte government.
mhm.
And of course, I think the Congress is also ending. And what are some of the things that, you would like this government or Congress to complete before or by next year?
Well, we do hope that next year will usher more human rights based laws. No, we welcome the pronouncement, for example, of some senators that are revisiting their position about the death penalty, because that's also one of the priority areas that we've worked on during
Yeah.
past years. And then, because it's election, and every time that the election season is nearing, we always reactivate our Bantay Karapatan sa Halalan campaign. And basically, what we do during this time is to um, educate the public about their rights when it comes to the right to suffrage, how it is important for them to exercise that right, and then at the same time, the right to participate, no, on the part of the candidates. And then we also monitor during the actual conduct of elections. Usually, our investigators are scattered all throughout, and we monitor. We are hopeful that the elections next year will be peaceful. It will be honest. It will be transparent. Um, we do hope that the noteworthy initiatives will be continued. You know, to be fair, no, if we're going to look at the current administration, a lot of good laws were passed during their time. The universal health care, when it comes to education. So we do hope that the Safe Space Act, for example, was also introduced, and then the aggressive vaccination campaign. If we're going to see the pandemic continuing up until 2022 or 2023, we hope that that will be sustained. So we hope that, and as I was saying a while ago,
Mhm.
in the area of economic, social, and cultural rights, a lot of progress was made. So we hope that this will be sustained.
Right. You mentioned earlier, I don't mean to pick it out exactly, but you mentioned domestic violence. I was wondering if you can give us maybe what are the most serious human rights issues that, I mean, if there's maybe a top three or top five thing, if is domestic violence one of them, or maybe what are the top three, top five major concerns with regards to human rights in the Philippines?
You know, sir, if we were talking siguro several years ago,
Okay.
in another time, domestic violence or sexual abuse or abuse cases of abuse in general would have figured in the top three. And
Okay.
for the usual cases that we handled in the years past, no, kaya lang because of the campaign against drugs, the number of cases that we've investigated far more outweigh those cases. But it's still, I would say that it's still pegged within the top priority or the top
Okay.
number of cases that we have. Although yun nga, naging slanted kasi because of the number of killings.
Right. So I take it to mean that the drug-related abuses are number one right now. Could you be more specific? I mean, is there data?
Yeah.
And then what kind of specific um, abuses, I suppose? Is it just EJKs, or is there cases of torture also, or wrongful arrest, things of that nature?
So we formed an EJK task force in 2016, and that was headed primarily by Commissioner Gwendolyn Pimentel-Gana. And to date, we have investigated 3,747 cases involving 4,349 victims. And if we're going to look at the categories, 2,188 of these killings pertain to law enforcement operations, and then 1,558 were committed by unidentified assailants, or what we would say as vigilantes. And then
Really, these are all killings, or just solely killings, or does it include wrongful arrest or torture,
these are
or
just killings.
just
These are
killings?
just
Okay.
killings, yes.
Okay.
So we've separated the arrests. And
Okay.
then, so we've investigated these cases, and we've recently come out with a report. And in that report, we highlighted some of our findings. Basically, we re-echo what the DOJ has also mentioned. Diba, we remember that the Secretary of Justice also formed a review panel,
Right.
and
Right.
that is in connection with their commitment during the Human Rights Council, where they committed that there's going to be a review panel. And we welcome the fact that the PNP opened its
Records.
yeah, to the DOJ and now the NBI. And they did say that basically there was no adherence to the Police Manual of Operations. That's what we also saw. And then we also did say that the intent to kill was evident, as borne out by the number of gunshot wounds and the location of the wounds. And then we did say that there were some discrepancies that we noted. Say, for example, we didn't. There were accounts that weapons were used, but no weapons were
found
there. They did say, for example, that nanlaban, but it happened that it was contrary to the account of the witnesses. And then we also noted that there were a number of operatives as contrasted to the assailants. And then there was an incentive system that we noticed also in place.
Okay. Before you joined us, my reporter Christian and I were arguing about the numbers.
By the way, we can send a copy of that.
Yes, please.
Press
Of the
statement
data.
nila.
Yeah. So we were sort of debating because there have been contrasting numbers reported in media over the past years. Some say as high as 30,000, and of course the official PNP figures only mentioned, I think, or something around 6,000. And then I was pointing out to Christian that even some of our columnists had pointed out that there has been a third-party study commissioned by Columbia University and I think by UP Diliman that basically dispelled. But siguro maybe it's good to hear from you because it's be more authoritative. What is the official figure po ba in terms of death counts related to drugs? What maybe since the president came to office?
Yeah. Well, the Commission on Human Rights cannot really say how many is the official number of deaths. What I just mentioned was a number of cases we have investigated thus far. And you are right in pointing out that when you look at government's numbers based on real numbers PH, it's pegged at around 6,000. And there are other contrary figures. But one thing that stands out based on our monitoring is that I think it was in the year 2018. Rachel can correct me on this. That that the government came out with its year-end accomplishment report, and that was the time when they were using terminologies like death under investigation. And if you were to revisit that report, they did say at that point that there were 16,000 plus deaths under investigation. So we were telling at that time that it's best to fully investigate those cases and to know the conclusion or the outcome of those investigations so that we can know whether or not those numbers will add up to the current 6,000 numbers of the government or not. And until and unless there is a full-blown investigation of those numbers, it's just interesting to note that they did say that at that time there were at least 16,000 deaths under investigation.
Can you talk about the investigations that CHR has been conducting? If you can mention the overall number again, and then how many of those have been prosecuted or maybe is in trial? Has there been any? Have there been any convictions? Maybe just an update.
So we're currently investigating 3,747 cases involving 4,349 victims. And then we do note that up until now, there's only a lone conviction, and that's the Kian de los Santos case. And that's what we've been constantly reiterating, that we have to see more Kian de los Santos cases. And then based on our monitoring, as of March of this year, there has been 14 cases filed in the courts, 30 cases.
1-4.
Yeah. 1-4, and then 30 cases in the Office of the Ombudsman, 27 at the Office of the Prosecutor, and 73 at IAS. And then we have an additional note that there are 5 admin cases at the Ombudsman.
Right.
To distinguish it probably from the criminal ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how frustrating it is with only one conviction and so many thousands more. But where's the bottleneck? Is it in the prosecution level? Is it in the pre-trial investigation, or is it COVID, or a combination of all of these things? What needs to happen to, I suppose, speed things up?
Siguro, if we're looking at the 4 pillars of the justice system, probably it's in the investigation and prosecution. No, we have to see more cases reaching the courts. And unfortunately, there has been no comprehensive investigation and therefore no prosecution also of cases, no cases being charged. And this is somehow out of the ordinary because, if a death happens, automatically you have laws in place, and that's murder or homicide because there's no HAK law yet. And then, so if that is uncontested, then the charges will stick, right? But because they have this non-laban defense, then the justifying circumstances would have to come in play, whether it's in self-defense, as they mentioned, or not, no? And what happened is a unilateral assertion from the police that these are non-laban. And that's okay if that's their defense. But the point is it should have reached the courts so that it's the courts which will now validate based on the evidences that they're weighing, whether it's really non-laban or not. But unfortunately, we didn't see cases being filed. That should have been automatic before. And there would have been no problem really. Especially if we're assuming that these are true non-laban cases, no? We're just waiting for the court's pronouncement to say that, and that's what we've been harping on during the past few years. There's more. There's a need to hear it more from the court rather than from the police.
I see. So is it a problem now of the judicial system rather than the prosecution? Ganun ba yun? Or does it have to do? Is there a reluctance on the part of the courts to take it on, or maybe the prosecution is, under the DOJ is moving slow to file, and I'm just trying to figure out where the problem is.
Probably not from the judiciary because they cannot act on something that has not reached their docket.
So it's more of the prosecution, that's a problem.
And more of the police.
I see. But you mentioned earlier that even the Justice Secretary had ordered an investigation. Are you are you working with the DOJ to maybe hasten the processing of these cases? And what is the feedback from them? What excuses are they giving for the slow processing of these cases?
Well, we really welcome the statement as well as the actions coming from the Secretary of Justice. He really did follow through his commitment during the Human Rights Council. And he engaged with us. We're also very happy about that. He went here to the Commission on Human Rights. He dialogued with us. He engaged with us. He updated us. We also talk to him, and we did welcome nga the fact that PNP was more open. We did say that whatever step, however minuscule, kasi many would say that konti lang as compared to the thousands, but sabi din naman namin here at the commission, it's better than nothing. And that's what we like, to see movement, to see recognition, and that's what SOJ did. And we hope that it's going to be sustained. This will, as what we have been constantly saying, this will actually illustrate complementarity. If government is able to sustain this initiative, come out with its report, make sure that there's accountability, then this will actually bode well in reflecting that our justice system works. And then we're also very happy, and we welcome the efforts of the DOJ in making sure that there's a more active AO25. In recent weeks, this mechanism has been looking into a lot of political killings, journalists, local executives, and all that. And we're so happy. There's been meetings in Visayas, in Luzon. And one of the things that they came out with right now is the finding on the Bloody Sunday incident. So we're glad that that the SOJ, the Secretary of Justice, through the DOJ, is actually moving and engaging with us.
What about the PNP? They have a new chief. Have you had CHR had a chance to dialogue with the new chief and maybe settle some of those hurdles in prosecuting cases? Huh?
During the time of Chief PNP Eleazar, there were lines of communication. Right now, with the current Chief PNP, none yet, no, but probably just because we were caught off guard with the passing of Chair Chito, so we had our hands full. But we intend to reach out. We've always done that in the past, regardless of who the Chief PNP is. And then our collaboration naman continues. So we just celebrated Human Rights Week. The Human Rights Affairs Office was here. Our lectures with the PNP continue. Our collaborative efforts with them naman continue.
Yeah, interestingly, you mentioned also the political killings and then also the journalists. I was watching the speech of Maria Ressa when she received her award. And of course, the criticism against her is that, they question whether or not there's actually valid reasons to say the Philippines is a dangerous place for journalists. But interestingly, in her speech, she was saying that there were more lawyers killed in 2021 there were journalists. Does that jive with your figures? I mean, that suggests to us that's really there's a bigger issue in the Philippines. I don't know if it's just journalists or lawyers, or maybe it would be more accurate to say that the Philippines has a criminal problem. Is that you? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that your view as well, or maybe you see things differently?
The numbers for both sectors are cause for concern.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say one sector outweighs another, but
right.
It's concerning. We did see a number of killings when it came to lawyers. We have to remember the killings last year of the judge, of the couple in Davao. So there has been killings. And then We've also noted some recent killings on journalists, Malabanan, for
Yes,
example.
in that in
So the killings continue in both sectors. It's a cause for concern because we just don't want these killings to continue, regardless of who the victims are and regardless of
right.
what the sector they
No, what
belong.
I'm saying is it's just not, to say it's only journalists or to say it's only lawyers
Yeah,
means means to me personally that you're ignoring the bigger issue that there's killings happening all over the place, and it's may not be appropriate to categorize them as lawyers or journalists because there's a problem of killings, period, right? I mean, is that what you see also, or is that not a
yeah.
valid concern? No.
Generally, yes. And I
Okay.
think that's what we've also been stressing in the past. When it came to the war on drugs kasi, di ba,
Yeah.
people were questioning, is CHR pro-criminal? Why are you siding on these drug victims, whereas they are yung mga salot ng lipunan? But we were saying nga na, we don't have to look at the identities and the sectors that they belong to. At the end of the day, these are humans. But
Right.
the message that we also wanted to project then was there should be zero tolerance for killings, because if there is tolerance for killings, one day you'll see it spill over to other sectors as well. And you don't
Hmm.
want that to happen. Basically, you want people to have full trust in the justice system. You don't want people taking the law into their own hands, or you don't want people to resort to vigilantes
Yeah.
killing other people just because of personal grudges and all that. So probably that's what we saw also happening over the last few years. We've seen killings spread over other sectors as well.
Yeah, I think some of those who are critics of Maria Ressa are pointing out that, say that the problem may have to do with either politics, political rivalry, or maybe businesses gone awry, and then it spills over to journalists, and it spills over to lawyers or maybe other sectors. Is that a valid? Would you say that's a valid observation, or you see it differently?
Yeah. I was looking at our numbers. And again, this may not totally capture the real picture because we
Yeah.
keep track of what we're investigating, not what's really happening. So we've noted that there are at least 43 lawyers, judges killed, and
Wow.
then
Wow.
22 for journalists. So
Wow. Well,
that's what
any
we see.
single person is more than enough, right? Diba? Pero, so, I mean, that seems to suggest to us that there's a bigger problem really than just a particular category of professionals, right?
That's right. That's right.
Oh. Um, so how is CHR working on those? I mean, is there any program that you're undertaking now with DOJ or PNP or maybe some other branches in government to, I guess, address criminality and violence? No?
So the AO25 mechanism works for political killings, and
Okay.
we're very active in our engagement with DOJ, with PNP, in AFP in that regard, and other government agencies concerned. And then there are also other mechanisms, the IACAT, for example, for trafficking and all that. But basically, we continue our separate and independent investigations. We do our level best. Uh, the numbers are overwhelming, but
Yeah.
we try our level best naman to investigate all of these cases.
You said that you have some mechanisms to let people know or to have people report. I guess this is an ongoing program for CHR to educate people because obviously a human rights violation doesn't have to end up with death, right? I mean, it could be other forms of harassment, or you mentioned red tagging, for example, right? And so maybe what are some of the things that you feel people should know more about? I guess this is an opportunity since you're talking to us, right? And we'll be showing this to the public. If you were talking to the general population, reminding them, hey, these are your rights. What are some of the maybe reminders that are most useful, or maybe people don't think that they have those rights, but it turns out that they actually do. What are some of those things that you'd like to remind people to protect in terms of their human rights. And then how can they report things to you? Maybe a hotline or a website or social media that they can go to.
Yeah. So I think the human rights has been very misunderstood for such a long time, and
Right.
one of the things that we've seen over the past few years is the misconception about what the role of the CHR is and what is the role of the Philippine National Police when it comes
Okay.
to certain rights into play. Kasi nga, it's quite misleading when we say CHR, no, and we're talking about the right to life, we're talking about the right to property, the right
Yeah.
yung sa rape
Economic
cases,
rights and basic
Mhm.
rights. Okay.
Yeah, so probably first is we want to straighten the misconception about the mandate of the CHR.
Okay.
We do say that yes, we're talking about human rights, but basically human rights is a state obligation primarily.
Okay.
And you see that in the state policies of Article 2 of the Constitution. And
Right.
because it's in the Constitution, it's therefore legal. And we now see the government doing its role of protecting and promoting through the creation of different agencies under the executive. So say for what we also in infographics we say when it comes to your right to health, it's a DOH catering to that. And the government is able to take care of our health through their vaccination program, for example. And then the right to social security is care of the SSS and the GSIS. The right to life is PNP. And the
Right.
CHR is just a monitor, a watchdog, an advisor of the government. We're not really the prime movers when it comes to
Right.
human rights protection. And then,
So you work on policy mainly.
yeah, and then it's a check and balance mechanism. We're not under the executive, but we're still part of the government. And then we have this investigation mandate, which complicates the whole issue, no? And sometimes there's an overlap with the PNP kasi primary mandate naman talaga sa kanila yung human rights protection when it comes to right to life, for example, and all that. But we investigate cases perpetrated by state agents. That's not to discount those committed by non-state agents because of IHL. If, for example, it's a common crime, we do say that's a police matter. Yes, your
I see.
human right has been violated. The government does not want that. And
But you don't prosecute.
yeah, but what the government will do is to
Yeah.
make sure that there is accountability through the PNP. The PNP will investigate and file the case. But for the CHR, we delve into abuse of power because of the social contract theory nga, di ba, na in
Right.
exchange for the votes,
Right.
you embrace the obligation to protect the human rights of the people. And then we also investigate when the victim is part of the vulnerable sector. So we have a special bias for the vulnerable, for the disadvantaged, for women, children, PWD, senior citizen. So sometimes the public gets confused. Why did CHR investigate? Yung
The
perpetrator
DSWD
ay
matter.
ordinary kwan naman,
Yeah.
citizen. Kaya lang kasi yung victim happens to be a member of the vulnerable sector.
I see.
So we will investigate. And then recently, because of business and human rights, we've also delved into that issue, di ba? We conducted an inquiry on climate change, for example, climate justice. And then some special laws that has been
That's
given to
interesting.
us. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then so that's the first. And then the second probably is human rights. It pertains to the basic thing that we'd like the people to understand is it's connected with the right to life because it's the supreme fundamental right. And human rights give meaning to our life. Kasi if without human rights, yes, you'd be alive and breathing, but there's no meaning if you cannot express yourself, if you cannot exercise your religion, if you cannot have adequate standards of living, if you're not entitled to decent wages or to dignity per se. So parang sa amin, it's the essence of human life. It adds character. But people get confused because when you talk about human rights, they appreciate the individual rights per se, the thematic, say for example, women's rights, child
Right.
rights, right to
Correct.
health, and then but they fail to connect it with the whole
The
concept
whole
of human
framework,
rights.
no, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a narrative that we're trying to change.
Are
And
you are
we're
you working with DepEd or CHED maybe for maybe inclusion in curricula? I'm just teaching children from a young age what human rights is. No, no.
yes, that's actually mandated under the law. We're
Okay.
constantly engaging, um, but there's a lot of room for improvement, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And then reflecting on our own rin naman kasi, the way we're organized, we only have 16 regional offices. And these 16 regional offices are located only in one province.
Mm.
And the area of jurisdiction is too wide. And then we only have two information officers. And that is the reason why we've expanded our social media. We've tried to make it more visual. We've tried to make it more positive and simple so that we can capture more audiences. And then what we've done is to visibly promote the CHR, our hotline numbers, our directory. And then we also have a client care kit. This client care kit contains our directory, our services, basic human rights knowledge, saan ka pupunta.
Mm-hmm.
We also include there the number of government agencies, PNP,
Right. You
DSW.
direct them already to where they can
Yes,
get. Yeah.
yes, and we let them know that if, for example, you have a problem, then there are a lot of agencies who can help you.
That's very interesting. Maybe after this interview, I can reach out to you later. Maybe Manila Times and CHR can have like a public information campaign. Parang, do you know these are your right? Parang ganun lang. Maybe, anyway, I'll talk to you about it. That's not the purpose of this meeting. It just occurred to me that we can do something together.
Yeah, it's a welcome initiative.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
It would bode well for human rights and for the CHR.
Do you mind if I call in back now our reporters? Maybe Christian and Kathleen have questions. I think Attorney Guia, I think he's asking about yung case sa International Criminal Court, diba, na tapos was suspended recently. I think his question is whether or not CHR has any collaboration or is coordinating with the ICC on that matter. Na tama ba, Christian?
Yes po. And how will the CHR in any way help the ICC for this?
Will you help will the CHR help the pero wala pa eh, di ba? Suspended. Anyway, and maybe Attorney Dia can answer. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, we recall that the government entered the Rome Statute or the ICC treaty, no? And then the CHR naman has this mandate under the Constitution to monitor government's compliance with its treaty obligations. So what we do is we keep track of those conventions or treaties that the government enters into. And then we see what are their obligations, and then we advise government along these lines. And then if you're going to look at the Rome Statute, it does say that from the time of withdrawal, it's still in effect 1 year after. So that's what we said. We said to government. We reminded at that time that it's unfortunate that you're withdrawing from a treaty that you entered into because it's a human rights treaty. And then we did say that under this convention that you entered into, this is now the scope. And then what we did now was to constantly remind government about its obligation while it's still in force. So from the time that it was entered into up until 1 year after its withdrawal, it's in effect. We have had no formal engagements with ICC. And then it's premature for us to comment right now or to say because it's speculative kasi we haven't received any formal communication din naman from ICC. And as the chair mentioned during the Senate inquiry, theirs is a separate mechanism from NHRI's. Or an NHRI, we do have counterparts in other countries. And we've looked at the other country experiences. They don't engage as much naman with the NHRIs. And then their mandate is international kasi, tapos ours naman is local and national. And we're not obliged, nor were we engaged. And we haven't received any communication from them. So what we're just doing is continuing our job according to the Constitution. So we're investigating regardless of whether there's ICC or not, because that's what we're told by the Constitution to do.
Yes po. Pero coming from the part of the CHR, ano po bang consequence kung halimbawa ayaw makipag-cooperate ng Pilipinas sa ICC? Kasi pinapa-investigahan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So under that treaty kasi, and we have to remember that despite the withdrawal, it's enforced during the time that you entered until 1 year after the withdrawal. And it says there that the government has the obligation to cooperate. Because you entered into an agreement, basically, that's what the contract says. So that's what we're also telling the government. And then on the practical side kasi, it would be to the advantage of the government if it cooperates. Because if it is able to demonstrate complementarity, if it's able to demonstrate that, hey, we've investigated these cases, hey, we have zero tolerance for these cases, it can actually be an active way of defending itself, as contrasted from taking a very passive approach where you just allow the mechanism to continue and then later on say that you have not been afforded the opportunity to be heard. So it's actually an opportunity for the government to demonstrate its position, to defend itself, to adduce also evidence in its behalf, so that it's not one-sided, as they would also say. And then we also keep on saying that there's still a lot of time because it's still at that stage where it hasn't reached the pre-trial chamber. And at this time, during the pre-trial investigation, it's still entertaining information, data, and any amount of information. And if they come across information that justice is working, the justice system is working, there's accountability, then they can at any time stop. So there's really more value in engaging, in cooperating, rather than taking a wait-and-see attitude and just letting things take its course. Because yun nga, there's still something that can be done.
I think Christian is asking about the task for the next administration, the next government. Kasi we had as a roundtable, yes, si DDB Secretary Catalino Cuy, and he was suggesting that the anti-drug campaign should be continued, essentially because there's unfinished business. So I think that's what Christian was saying. Parang, what is your views on
Thank you. Sorry,
what is your
Christian.
view? As siguro maybe the better question is, how can it be improved by the next government? Take into consideration the human rights dimension, di ba? Can there be a campaign that is also respective of human rights? I guess that's the gist, yeah.
No problem in continuing the campaign against drugs. We're supportive of that. And there's a lot to be benefited from totally eradicating drugs. And interestingly, I've attended a top-level dialogue just recently where they said that prevalence is not actually a problem in the Philippines. Regardless of whether or not prevalence is a problem here in the Philippines, we would want to see drugs entirely eliminated. So we're very supportive of that. Having said that, it's also very interesting in the said dialogue where the DOH was lamenting. It was saying, Mana, we always had a program about drugs and we're rehabilitating the drug addicts. And it's actually working. And we're just sad that our efforts are not included in this war conducted, no? And that's what we want to see more. We want the government to see the drug problem from the right to health approach. if you're looking at it from the right to health approach, you are recognizing that there's a root cause for that problem and you're addressing the root cause. Once you address the root cause, you see it's a complex problem. People are not only using it because of the availability. People are not only using it because of economic reasons, but there are also some users who may be esteemed professionals or ordinary students because of psychosocial reasons. And once you're recognizing that, you're now employing a multidisciplinary approach. So for those who need livelihood, you now recognize that you have to give them economic support. But for those who are using it because of depression or because of lack of social support, you're now providing them psychological services. You're now providing them a community base that will support them. Once you do this, you're now really addressing the problem from the root cause, and also with the aim of reintegrating them back into society. Because if you look at these users, they're not all criminals. Many of them are ordinary people, and you see value in what they're doing aside from the label. And what you want to do is to put them back, usher them back into society, get over the addiction. Because diba, sometimes yun nga, people want to stop, but it's an addiction. So how do you do that over a long period of time? But you don't want to kill them because some of them are actually very productive citizens of the country. So the right to health approach will have to be integrated in this campaign against drugs. And then it has to involve more the DOH. There has to be more rehabilitation centers. And then it has to focus on the rule of law. Kasi what we also noted in the war on drugs is that there is a basic law, RA 9165. RA 9165 says the penalty to be given against them is apprehension and fine. But what we saw was death happening as a consequence, and that penalty is not allowed in the Philippines. So you now see people taking the law into their own hands, the police taking the law into their own hands, having an arbitrary interpretation of the law. And that to us is sad because it contributes to the breaking down of the rule of law. And again, in the long term, you don't want that to happen because you want people to have faith in laws. You want people to maintain its faith in the government and in agencies. You don't want them taking the law into their own hands and having their own subjective interpretations. So bottom line is continue the campaign against drugs. It's actually good. Instead of the peace and order approach, the right to health approach. Instead of dispensing of these users, reintegrate them back into society, then go after the supply, go after the big fishes, not the small ones. Because basically, it will be a vicious cycle if you're just getting rid of the users, not the supplier.
Yes, sir. So,
Okay, go
good
ahead.
afternoon, attorney. So, you mentioned earlier that children are part of the vulnerable sector of our society, which they're also prone, or they're also possible that they may encounter domestic abuse. So, based on the current situation that students are staying at home because of the pandemic, what are our figures on domestic abuse on children, and have we seen an increase or decrease during the pandemic?
Caitlin, I'll get back to you with the actual figures. Rachel can actually send it to you. But what we've noted are some cases of concern. The pandemic has really magnified some issues, no? Say for example, the modules, diba? We did say that it casts a heavy burden on students and the parents alike when it came to online teaching. And then we also lament the fact that many students, especially the most poor, really do not have internet access. And I think that's what we saw in some sensational cases of suicide. And just recently, yung news about a child yung ginamit niya yung martilyo sa parents niya and all that. And then we also note that mental health has also become a concern of students. And then compounded. So our figures are we've noted figures even before the pandemic, and this has just continued during the pandemic. And we would say this is a compounding factor. It just magnifies more the issues felt by women and by children alike because of the unique circumstances. Yun nga where Sir Dante a while ago was saying nga na parang pressure cooker kasi you're putting them in one confined space with the perpetrator sometimes and with no remedy to seek outside help.
So, ma'am, may I know if like you have a rough idea of what kind of abuses are being received by children, especially if from their parents or from other external factors as well, ma'am? Just a rough idea.
Yeah. So our Gender Equality Women's Human Rights Center have noted at least 42 cases of abuse this year. And then many of these cases sometimes are sexual in nature. We've also had some domestic abuse cases. I do remember that there were mother and children who sought our help during the early months of the pandemic, and they were also claiming domestic abuse. But it's very unfortunate on these cases kasi sometimes at the heat of the abuse, they seek our help, they go to our help, but because of the battered woman syndrome, pag sinuyo na, pag kinausap na, and then with the passage of time, they forgive their spouses, they return, or sometimes kasi they don't know what to do next because they have children, so they return. So that's what we saw over the past year. Many come to us at the height of the abuse, but later on they go back. And we have to respect the wishes, of course, but we offer them psychological help. We've also referred a number to crisis centers, to shelters. We've done that in this year. Been difficult kasi may added requirements of swabbing, of quarantining them, tapos yung hirap rin nila to absorb more during the time of the pandemic. So those have been some of the issues that we've encountered.
All right, ma'am. So another issue po right now be experienced by schools is the presence of police force, and I think some schools are also pushing for this in the House of Representatives for the UPD and the Accord to push through, especially with the height of activism right now. So what is the stand of CHR on these red tagging cases in universities, in schools, and how can CHR ensure that the people's right to speech or freedom of speech is still does prevail in our society?
Yeah. So before and during the pandemic, we've been receiving a number of requests and complaints from the youth. Many of them are also student councils. Many of them are student journalists. Many of them are student activists from all parts of the country, from many universities. And they've been alleging that they've been experiencing intimidation, threat, harassment. Some of them have been arrested also. And our stand has always been consistent. Sabi nga namin na dissent is not necessarily an act of terrorism, nor should it be labeled as overthrowing the government or yung being a leftist. Yun din yung sabi namin kasi those have been the modeled issues during the past 3 years. We did say that in a democracy, in a vibrant democracy, you want divergent opinions to thrive. It's healthy for discourse and for government to improve its public services, you want feedback. And that is one way of encouraging feedback so that you're able to improve on your services. And we did say that students have that right, no? Even as a child, may child rights, what more for students? And you want to afford them that opportunity while they're in college to be exposed to different fields of thought so that they can actually sharpen their knowledge, they can sharpen their principles in life, and you want them to be able to exercise that fully. So we don't want anything that will curtail their rights as long as they are doing it within the parameters of the law. That's what we also keep emphasizing, no? Do it within the bounds of the law. And if you do it within the bounds of the law, that's just activism. If you're just petitioning the government for the redress of your grievances, that's allowed. And that's guaranteed under the Constitution. And we do lament the instances when there has been repression, campus repression. We do remember that the UPDNP Accord further enhance that constitutional right. So it's unfortunate that they revisited that accord, and there are moves to revoke it. And we do hope that the basic tenets of the accord will remain in force. We do hope that the red tagging will not continue. It endangers many. If you talk to these students, you'd also be sad because they also highlight the fact that their families are also imperiled. And many of them are just ordinary students, student activists, I would say, and not necessarily those that have gone to the mountains, for example, to join the NPA. And I think there has to be a clear distinction of that. That's what we're also told the AFP. There has to be a distinction of the combatants and the non-combatants. And if you're merely exercising your right in a peaceful way, then there has to be a different treatment of those class of people as opposed to those who took up arms, which is really not allowed and which we do not also support or adhere to.
Just to follow up on that, ma'am. So in the past year, there have been some students who were part of some rallies or some protests, and they were arrested just because they were in the vicinity. So what is the stand of CHR when it comes to these things? Are you working with police force on how to prevent this? And are you also helping out some students who were arrested during these times?
So our stand is they're exercising their constitutional right. The right to peaceably assembly is a constitutional right. They can do that. It's constitutionally guaranteed. We monitor rallies because that's what BP 880 says naman. They can actually do that. In those instances where they are arrested, we investigate those cases. We make sure that there is basis for their arrest. And if they are arrested, they are treated in accordance with the law and they are not abused. And then we refer them, say for example, to the PAW or to the IDP if they need the counsel, the services of a lawyer.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
So it's been a pleasure to be part of this roundtable discussion with Manila Times. We're so happy that media continues to be a relevant force in promoting and protecting human rights. It's very important in this time of disinformation and misinformation that agencies like the CHR are given opportunities to clarify our mandate, to talk about pressing issues and concerns that we are addressing. And we just like to convey to the public that the CHR is always open and welcoming of people who need help. We will stay truthful and faithful to our constitutional mandate. But basically, the core message that we want to impart to the public is that we have to give importance to our rights. We have to stand up for our rights, and we have to stand up for the rights of others. We have to make sure that in the upcoming elections, we are able to exercise our right to vote because it will impact our human rights. And what we want our leaders to factor in when they are in government is that they have to be the prime movers of human rights protection and promotion in exchange for the votes or the trust and the faith that has been given to them during ballot time. So again, thank you very much to the Manila Times, to Sir Dante Francis Ang, as well as the team. And we all greet you here at the Commission on Human Rights. Happy holidays.